Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about positive and negative space, and we're going to unravel the mystery of it. So sometimes when we talk about positive and negative space, students think my positive space is when I'm happy and I'm with my friends, and my negative space is when I'm with people of different political views than mine. That's not the kind of positive and negative space we're talking about. We're talking about positive and negative space in art. And like figuratively, no, I'm sorry, literally, we're talking about this kind of space. So we can't talk about, this was in the chapter, I know you read it because you're really a good person, but when we're talking about the positive and negative space as they refer to two-dimensional and three-dimensional artwork. So that's how we're going to discuss them right now. So when we're talking about three-dimensional artwork, positive and negative space is a little easier to comprehend and understand. So when we're referring to 3D artworks, the positive space is the solid object, it's the sculpture itself. And the negative space is the area that surrounds it and the area that's in between parts of the sculpture. So the positive space is in a 3D object is the solid object itself, and the negative space is the area that surrounds it, and that is in between areas of the 3D object. So when we talk about positive and negative space in two-dimensional works, it's going to be a little more complicated, but let's go back to three-dimensional works. So when students or artists are drawing from life, it's really equally important to pay attention to the negative space surrounding in between parts of an object or two objects as it is to look at the object or the positive space itself in order to draw it or depict it correctly. And why is that? One reason is that it helps you determine what angle the object is situated in. So when we look at this, the stool here, it's not facing us head on. The legs don't appear to be the same length at this angle. They're not like straight across. Instead, it's tilted to the side. And if we look at that negative space that surrounds it, then we notice that this leg is higher up than that leg. And so we can almost think of this little area right here as a triangle that those legs fit along. And then there's this kind of trapezoidy-like space in the middle there. So then this helps you like observe that things are not straight on, but they're situated at these different angles. So that's one reason. The second reason it's important is it helps you gauge the distance between areas of an object or between two objects. So for example, when we look at the space, the negative space here between these two legs on this left side, we notice that there's this much space here, and there's a little bit more space here because the legs aren't straight up and down, they're at an angle, and therefore it helps us understand that the space here is a different width than the space down here. But it also helps us determine like how long this area is and how long this area is as it relates to one another. So if I don't know like how wide this is, I might make it too narrow. I might make it too wide when I'm drawing it. I might make this area here equal in distance to this area here, which is not correct. And so paying attention to that negative space helps us gauge how far apart things are from one another. And then another reason why it's important to pay attention to that negative space is it helps us create more three-dimensional looking objects. So for example, when we get up to the stool here, if I was to draw the top of it straight across, that top of that stool would look like a shape. It would look flat. But I'm going to look at this and see how this kind of angles up here, this negative space. When I get over here, it angles up here. So like the closer to the center, the narrower that negative space is. And that helps me make the top of that stool look like it's rounded, and that in turn helps make that look more three-dimensional. It helps create more of a depiction of, or the illusion of, mass and volume. So now we're going to talk about positive and negative space as it relates to two-dimensional artworks, like such as drawings, paintings, prints, even photographs. So when we discuss this positive and negative space in artworks, we can view it in several forms, and makes it a little more complicated to understand. So we're going to start with a really relatively simple abstraction of three women, three friends, by William H. Johnson. And then we're going to move to more complicated two-dimensional artworks. So one thing you want to do when you're describing positive and negative space, you want to be very clear, very specific, and not generalize. And by generalize, what I mean by that is I don't want you to like describe the entire, everything that's solid in the image as positive space, and everything that surrounds and is in between these solid objects as a negative space. That doesn't really tell me you know what you're talking about. So first, I'm going to give an example relating to this image that's not specific and that is generalized. So in the generalized version of this, I'm going to say that girls represent the positive space, while the taupe or beige area surrounding them and in between them is the negative space. So now I'm going to give you a more specific example. So when you're giving a specific example, the first thing you want to do is don't describe the whole picture, but zoom into an area. And then you're gonna describe the positive space, these positive spaces that are adjacent to one another, that are next to each other, and then you're gonna describe their corresponding negative space that relates directly to them. So when you zoom in and you're clear and specific, it tells me that you understand the concept. So I'm going to talk about the lighter brown girl in the middle and the kind of reddish brown colored skin girl that is to her right. So the girls' heads, their necks, this girl's shoulder in the green and yellow and red, and this little bit of area of the dress of the girl that's in taupe and yellow. Those are the positive spaces. And in between those two girls is the negative space. So when you're that clear and specific, it helps me understand that you understand the concept. Now let's say you were copying this drawing and you wanted to get it exactly right. When you're drawing these three girls, if you look at the shape of that negative space between them. It's a very clear and very specific shape. So if you're able to draw that shape, it helps you more readily be able to draw the figures that are next adjacent to that negative space. It helps you draw the positive space better. So now we're going to talk about a painting that is really super complicated and detailed. Before we talk about the painting, I want to just mention that this painting is by Vincent Valdez, and it's called Kill the Pachuco Bastard, and it relates to a very specific incident in time and history in California and the Zoot Suit riots. And I've provided a video in this week's assignments that goes into the history of the Zoot Suit riots and the Pachuco. Okay, so let's go back to positive and negative space in a very complicated painting. So when you're trying to determine examples of positive and negative space in a complicated artwork, the first rule of thumb is what? Zoom into the, oops, that's not the first rule of thumb. Don't generalize. Don't try to discard the entire painting. Don't say the people and the tables and the walls are the positive space and the spaces between them surrounding them are the negative space. That's generalized, and that doesn't provide specific knowledge of the concept, and that doesn't let me know that you know what you're talking about. So the second rule is to zoom in to a smaller area of the painting and describe a very specific area of related and adjacent positive and negative space. So by related and adjacent, I mean, you're talking about, if you're talking about positive space, you're talking about areas of positive space that are relatively close to one another and that share the same negative space. I'm going to go back to that first painting. You're not going to like talk about this guy in the green sailor suit here as positive space and then go over here to talk about the negative space because they're not adjacent to one another and they're not related to one another. So you gotta like keep your positive and negative space in the same area and adjacent to one another. So we're zooming into a smaller area, and the area that we're going to describe of positive and negative space are related and adjacent to one another. So we could zoom in even closer. So from this image, we're going to zoom into this guy in the sailor suit. And the guy's green sailor suit with the wrinkles, like where his torso area is and his thigh area is and his left arm is, that's the positive space. And then that little bit of green, that kind of triangular shape of green that we see between his arm and torso and thigh, that's the negative space. Now we could zoom out a tiny bit further, the same detail of the painting, and we could talk about the guy in the green sailor suit with his arms stretched out. He's positive space. The man in the white sleeveless t-shirt and the suspenders and the hat and the striped pants, it's hard to see them. That's a positive space. And then this red and white checkered floor that is between those two men, that is, and this little area of red and white checkered that also kind of surrounds them, and this area between his legs and this area between his torso, that's the negative space. So as you see, we talked about two adjacent figures as a positive space and the area between them and that surrounds them is a negative space. And you'll also notice that I gave really clear details. So the man in the green sailor suit who has his right arm drawn back because he's getting ready to punch somebody, and the guy in the sleeveless t-shirt with his, oh look, he's got a Jesus tattoo there, and his suspenders and some like pants and a brown and black hat, he's the positive space. And then the red and white checkered floor between them and that surrounds them is the negative space. So that way, when you're that specific, it helps me understand that you know what you're talking about and you comprehend that concept of positive and negative space. So that is the end of our little video today, and I hope to see you soon.